Today, I want to tell you a story that still moves me to my core. A quiet, powerful tale of loss and rebirth unfolding under the endless burning sky of the Old West, where mesas stand like silent sentinels and every grain of sand holds a story of survival. It begins with one seemingly insignificant act of cruelty, a single moment of turning away that should have erased a life, but instead planted the seed of something extraordinary. If this kind of deep emotional journey hits home for you, give the video a like and let me know down below. Where on earth are you right now as we step into this tale? The merciless sun hammered down like a forge hammer on an anvil, scorching the endless red wasteland that rolled out forever. A sea of forgotten hopes baked hard under the sky. Vera Flint dropped to her knees in the blistering sand, watching the last wagon shrink into nothing against the far ridge. The canvas top swayed like a final goodbye, growing smaller until it vanished into the shimmering heat haze. Dust hung in the still air for a long moment, each grain catching the light like shards of shattered vows before drifting back to the ground. A dry wind stirred, swirling fine red powder into lazy spirals, then letting it fall again. A quiet, mournful song for someone already written off. Her hand drifted to the battered canteen at her hip. Half full, they'd said, as though that tiny scrap of mercy wiped away the bigger crime. It felt heavy against her side, but she knew the truth. Maybe 2 days if she rationed hard. 3 if the heat didn't steal it faster. Gideon Voss's cold words still rang in her ears like stones tumbling into a bottomless canyon. "You're dead weight now, Mrs. Flint. Can't haul extra mouths when the wells are drying up and winter's breathing down our necks early." They'd turned away without meeting her eyes, muttering about hard choices and the greater good, the kind of talk that lets men sleep at night after leaving a woman to die. 3 days from the nearest water, if there even was water where they guessed it might be. They'd practiced the cold shoulder like professionals, convinced their consciences were clean enough for the trail ahead. The silence hit her like a physical blow, thick and complete. No cricket chirp, no hawk cry, no rustle of grass, because there was no grass, just sand, rock, the occasional twisted juniper skeleton, and stubborn clumps of sage clinging to life. She tugged the brim of her faded bonnet lower, shading eyes that had already witnessed more grief than 32 years should hold. The blue cotton dress she'd picked out back in Boston, practical, modest, pretty once, now stuck to her like wet leather, dark with sweat and trail dust, useless armor against a land that didn't care. Thane. The name rose in her throat like a broken prayer. She swallowed it down before it could become a sob. Her husband had been gone more than a month, claimed by fever at a trading post 3 days past Fort Bridger. Without him, she'd turned invisible to the wagon train, a living ghost they couldn't bear to look at, a walking reminder of how fragile everything really was. She could still see the exact second the shift happened. The morning after Thane's hasty burial. Just a quick prayer and a pile of stones over hard earth. She'd walked up to the cook fire with her tin plate, and Mira Thorne had stared straight through her like she was already buried. The message was plain as day. No Thane meant no strong hands for the oxen, no skill fixing axles or wheels. She was just another mouth, another spot in the wagon that could be freed up. They'd put up with her for 1 more week, watching her fumble every chore he'd once made look easy. She'd tried. Lord, how she'd tried. She'd burned the beans black trying to cook, wasted precious flour. She'd offered to mind the livestock, but the oxen smelled her fear and turned wild under her shaky grip. Every mistake got counted, every stumble filed away as proof she didn't belong. Now, alone in the heart of the desert, Vera felt the full weight of being nobody's responsibility. It pressed on her shoulders heavier than any yoke. The land ran on forever in every direction, a blood-red painting streaked with sparse brush and lonely bone-white trees. Somewhere far beyond this hell waited California. Gold glittering in the creeks, black soil begging for a plow, fresh starts for anyone tough enough to take it. But for Vera Flint, that dream had died with Thane, leaving only the raw truth. A lone woman had no place in this world. She forced herself upright on legs that shook from exhaustion and terror. Her mouth felt packed with cotton, her tongue stuck to the roof. She twisted the canteen cap and stole the tiniest sip, holding the warm water on her tongue until it felt like mercy, then letting it slide down slow. The sun was sliding west, brushing the sky with amber and soft rose. Beautiful, she thought, the word distant in her mind. Even here, in this killing place, there could still be beauty. She figured she had 2 hours of daylight left, maybe 3 if the sky held out. Plenty of time to hunt for some kind of cover before full dark swallowed the land. If any cover even existed in this god-forsaken stretch. Vera pushed herself forward, not aiming for anywhere in particular because every direction looked just as empty and unforgiving. She walked simply because standing still would mean giving up, and she wasn't ready to hand the desert that victory yet. Her Boston-made boots, built for cobblestones and carriage rides, already pinched like iron traps. The leather had turned stiff and mean from the heat, and with every dragging step, grit wormed its way inside, scraping raw skin and sparking tiny fires that promised full-blown blisters by morning. Behind her, the wind swept in low and steady, wiping her tracks clean as fast as she made them, like the desert was erasing her from the map, determined to pretend she'd never been there at all. Vera didn't glance back. Nothing waited behind her except the sting of being left for dead and the cold taste of betrayal. Anything ahead had to be better than what she'd already survived. The desert loved to play games with distance. Heat warped everything, turning near into far and far into sudden, heart-stopping close. The horizon rippled like water on a hot skillet, conjuring fake pools of blue and distant peaks that vanished the moment you got hopeful. Vera didn't spot the figure until her third shaky stop to catch her breath. Some deep instinct, or maybe the faint wrongness in the empty landscape, made her turn. She'd been trudging what felt like forever, her shadow stretching long and black ahead like a faithful hound, when the hairs on the back of her neck stood up and forced her head around. He stood on a low rise, maybe 50 yards off, still as carved stone against the blood-red sky. From that distance he was mostly outline, wide shoulders, long hair stirring faintly in the dry breeze. He didn't move a muscle, like he'd sprouted straight out of the red dirt instead of walking there, part of the rock and the twisted juniper more than any living thing. Vera's heart slammed against her ribs hard enough to bruise. Every fireside warning the wagon train had traded came rushing back. Savages, they'd called them, wild and soulless, men who looked human but weren't. Stories of scalps lifted, torture that lasted days, white women dragged off to hells worse than dying, whole trains butchered and left for the buzzards. But this man, tall, broad, unmistakably a man now, didn't raise a hand or make a sound. He just watched, patient as the stones themselves, like time meant nothing to him. There was power in that stillness. Not emptiness, but restraint, the kind that holds a storm in check. Legs trembling from pure exhaustion, she forced herself upright and waved both arms like a drowning woman. The motion felt frantic, almost shameful, but dignity was a luxury she couldn't afford anymore. "Water!" The word scraped out as a cracked whisper, barely her own voice. "Please, I need water." He didn't budge. For a heartbeat, she wondered if he was even real, or just another heat mirage the desert loved to torment her with. visions so sharp you could almost touch them before they melted away. But when she blinked hard and looked again, he was closer. Not a lot, maybe 10 yards nearer, but closer. She hadn't seen him take a single step, hadn't heard boots on sand, yet there he was. It felt like the desert had bent itself, shrinking the space between them for reasons she couldn't guess. She tried to call again, but her throat clamped shut, dry and cracked as sun-baked hide. Instead, she lifted one shaking hand, palm up, the oldest plea in the world. The sun pounded down without mercy. Black spots fluttered at the corners of her sight like crows circling. Through the thickening haze of blackout, she watched him cock his head, studying her the way a hawk might eye some strange creature that had stumbled into its hunting ground. His face stayed shadowed in the failing light, unreadable. Then something shifted in the way he stood, a small change that could have been recognition, decision, or just simple notice. He took one step, then another. Closer now, she could make out bronze skin weathered dark by sun and wind, sharp angled features, eyes deep with something ancient and knowing. The world tilted hard. Vera's knees buckled for the last time. She knew she wouldn't get up again. The final thing she saw before darkness rushed in was the man striding toward her, smooth, unhurried, eating up the ground like the sand was nothing more than a dance floor. When awareness trickled back, it came in broken pieces. The rock of steady movement, the smell of worn leather and wood smoke, the solid feel of arms carrying her like she weighed no more than a child. The world rocked gently, purposefully. For a confused second, she thought she was back on the old ship out of New York, rolling with the Atlantic swell towards New Orleans. But no, this motion was different, deliberate, grounded. Her eyes cracked open to a sideways view of the desert sliding past. Someone was carrying her, each footfall measured and quiet, even on loose sand. She glimpsed strong legs working in rhythm, felt the calm power in the arms that held her steady. She tried to speak, but only a weak sound escaped, half protest, half raw thanks. The man answered with a low murmur, soft and wordless, like the desert itself speaking back. The man answered with a low sound, maybe words in a tongue she'd never heard, maybe just a quiet acknowledgement that needed no translation. When he finally spoke, his voice rolled out deeper than she'd guessed, roughened by years of wind, dust, and long stretches of silence under wide skies. Through the dizzy spin of her vision, Vera caught flashes of his face, hard lines carved by sun and hardship, high cheekbones, a mouth that hinted at both iron strength and a surprising gentleness. His eyes, when they dropped to meet hers, were midnight black, holding secrets deeper than any well she'd ever known. As he carried her on, other details seeped in. The faint, clean bite of sage clung to his clothes, laced with something wilder. Open prairie, cured hides, the sharp tang of campfire smoke. His buckskin shirt pressed soft against her cheek, worn smooth from use yet tough as the land itself. His breathing stayed even and calm, no strain showing despite the extra weight he bore so easily. "Water," she rasped, the word grinding past her parched throat like gravel. He halted sharp, and for a split second, terror spiked. She thought he'd drop her, leave her like the wagon train had. Instead, he shifted her weight without effort, one arm still cradling her while the free hand dipped to a pouch at his belt. A small water skin appeared. "Slowly," he said in careful, accented English, each syllable measured. "Too much? Too fast?" He tipped the skin to her lips, controlling the trickle so she couldn't gulp and make herself sick. The water came warm, leather-flavored with a faint, sweet edge, but it tasted like pure life sliding down. She ached to drain it in frantic swallows, but he eased it away before she could hurt herself. More later, he told her plainly, then started walking again. As they crossed the baked land, Vera started seeing it differently, through eyes that understood its hidden ways. Water wasn't gone. It just waited in secret places. Life clung on here, shaped by hard limits and clever survival. The man carrying her, her rescuer, she had to call him that now, moved like he belonged to this place, like he knew exactly where the buried springs hid and where rock overhangs offered shade. The sun hung low, bleeding gold across the horizon, when he finally stopped. Ahead, the land folded into a narrow canyon, red walls rising like sentinels. Thin smoke curled up pale against the twilight sky. A campfire. Others were there. He lowered her gently to the ground, steadying her until her legs found enough strength to hold. Up close now, she saw the sharp intelligence in his eyes, the quiet weighing as he studied her face. "You were dying," he said. "No drama, just fact. Now you live. The rest comes later." It wasn't a question, wasn't fishing for thanks, just truth laid bare. Vera nodded, sensing somehow that fancy words of gratitude would fall flat, maybe even insult him. In his world, you saved a life when it needed saving. Simple. Done. "My name's Vera," she said, offering her hand the way folks did back east. He studied the gesture a long beat, then took it, his palm hard, warm, grip strong but never crushing. "Kale," he answered. "Come. My sister will look after you." The shelter wasn't like anything she'd known back home. Hides stretched tight over a frame of poles, making a low, round space that felt ready to pack up in an hour or stand for 100 years. She ducked through the entrance and stepped into a world lit by fire. Flames danced in a center pit, smoke rising clean through a hole at the top. The smells hit her all at once: sage, sweet grass, something savory bubbling that made her hollow stomach knot with sudden, fierce hunger, and underneath it the deep, ancient scent of stone, sand, and timeless dust. Across the fire sat Kyle, his face shifting between shadow and warm glow. In that light, she saw him clear for the first time. His hair fell black and thick around his shoulders, catching firelight like spilled ink. His features were strong without being harsh, intelligence etched there, and something more, a steady watchfulness that made her feel seen and safe at the same time. In the dim edges of the shelter, shapes moved, other people watching her with open curiosity, yet keeping a respectful space. The truth hit her hard. This was another country entirely. Not her customs, not her people, not her rules. Yet here she stood, relying on their kindness, their know-how, their mercy. "You were dying," Kyle repeated, his English carrying a soft, rolling cadence she couldn't place. "The desert forgives nothing. 3 more hours, maybe 4, and you'd have been gone for good." Before she could answer, a woman stepped from the shadows, maybe 10 years older than Vera, moving with quiet, sure grace. Dark hair braided with small beads that winked in the firelight, eyes sharp like Kale's, but softened by something warm and motherly. "My sister Tindra," Coyle said. "She'll check you over." Tindra came close, carrying a wooden bowl that steamed with fragrant herbs. She knelt beside Vera, eyes scanning her with the practiced calm of someone who'd read bodies for years. Her touch was gentle, but certain. Forehead, wrist pulse, a light tilt of Vera's chin toward the light to study her eyes. Her hands moved with quiet certainty, checking Vera's forehead, feeling the pulse at her wrist, then gently tilting her chin toward the dancing firelight. They spoke in their own tongue, quick, flowing exchanges that carried the rhythm of long practice. The words flowed like a river, musical and strange, full of soft clicks and sharp stops that Vera's tongue could never hope to copy. Listening, she realized how much real talk happened beyond mere words. In the rise and fall of a voice, the tilt of a head, the subtle dance of fingers and eyes. "Foolish," Tindra finally said in thick, accented English, shaking her head in a way that needed no translation. "Your people, leaving a woman alone in this desert. No water, no food, no know-how. A death sentence, plain and simple." She offered the steaming bowl, and Vera took it with hands that still trembled. The broth hit her tongue rich and deep. Unfamiliar meat, wild herbs, a faint, bitter edge that might have been sage. It was the best thing she'd ever tasted in her life. Each careful sip pulled her back from the brink she hadn't even realized she'd been teetering on. "Slow," Tindra warned, echoing Kyle's earlier words. "Your body has to remember food again." As Vera sipped the warm liquid, she started noticing the others in the low shelter. An older man sat nearby, face etched with years but eyes keen and watchful. Two younger men, clearly kin to Kyle by the strong lines of their features, kept a quiet watch. Women of different ages moved in the shadows, some with little ones peeking shyly from behind skirts. Everyone watched her. Not with hostility, but with the steady judgment of people deciding whether this stranger, who'd been carried in half dead, belonged among them. Like driftwood washed up on a strange shore. "What happens now?" Vera asked, startled at how thin and weak her own voice sounded. Kyle and Tindra shared a quick glance, a whole conversation passing in silence between them. "Now you rest," Kyle said plainly. "Tomorrow you decide." "Decide what?" "Whether you live or die," he answered without hesitation. "The desert tested you once. Tomorrow we see if you can learn its ways." It wasn't a threat, just cold, hard truth. They'd pulled her back from death's door, but they couldn't walk the rest of her road for her. In their world, survival wasn't handed out. It was earned, breath by breath, sunrise by sunrise. Wrapped in soft furs that smelled of smoke and open land, Vera lay listening to the camp settle into night. She stared up through the smoke hole at the stars. Same ones she'd known all her life, yet somehow brighter here, more countless, arranged in patterns she'd never truly seen before. For the first time since Thane's death, her mind drifted not to loss, but to possibility. The idea felt fragile, almost too new to hold, but it was there, a tiny seed of hope taking root in ground she'd once thought barren. Dawn crept in gentle across the desert, the sky lightening from black to soft pearl, and rose before the sun finally rose. Vera woke to strange sounds, low voices, the friendly crackle of a fresh fire, the soft shuffle of the camp coming alive. Stepping outside, she breathed air crisp and clean, carrying scents she was starting to know. Sage, piñon pine, a faint whiff of cedar. The camp nestled in a natural bowl between towering red rock walls, shielded from wind and perfectly placed to catch the first warm rays. Kyle appeared beside her as if he'd been waiting, carrying 2 bowls of simple food, corn mush and strips of dried meat. They ate in easy silence, watching the desert wake. Birds she couldn't name calling from the cliffs above, a coyote's morning howl drifting from somewhere far off. "Today we start," Kale said when the bowls were empty. From somewhere at his belt, he pulled a bow, not fancy, just a clean curve of wood wrapped in sinew, practical and deadly. Vera stared at it, remembering the little pistol Thane had pressed into her hand before they left Boston, now lost somewhere in the sand with the wagons that abandoned her. "I don't know how," she admitted. "That's why we teach," he said simply, holding it out. The bow felt strange and heavy in her hands, heavier than something made of wood should. Her first shots were disasters. The arrows, cut from carefully chosen juniper, she'd later learn, went everywhere but where she aimed. One shot straight up, dropping back dangerously close to her feet. Another veered sideways, missing the target by 20 feet. The third flew forward decently enough, but buried itself in the dirt barely 5 yards away. The rest of the camp went about their morning chores, pointedly not staring at her struggles, but she caught the quick glances. Some amused, some curious, a few that might have been understanding. Children peeked from behind their mothers' skirts, giggling at every wild miss. Hours slipped by under the rising sun. Her arms burned from the unfamiliar pull, fingers raw and stinging where the string bit skin, small beads of blood welling up. Shot after shot, failure after failure. Frustration rose inside her like a gathering storm, threatening to break into tears or rage. But something deep down, maybe the same stubborn pride that had kept her on her feet those first awful days after Thane died, refused to let her quit. Perhaps it was the same raw grit that had kept her standing tall those first brutal days after Thane died, when the wagon train had stared while she fumbled every chore. Maybe it was pure desperation. The bone-deep understanding that mastering these skills could be the thin line between breathing tomorrow or becoming another forgotten pile of bones in the sand. Or maybe it was something quieter, something she couldn't quite name yet, but felt stirring deep inside. A slow, growing tie to this harsh land, these quiet people, and the stronger woman she was starting to become. Kyle stood steady behind her, a constant shadow. He never babied her, but his hands were patient, nudging her elbow, squaring her shoulders, showing her the right way to seat the arrow, pull the string to her cheek, and find that perfect frozen heartbeat before letting go. His words came spare and deliberate, each one weighed like gold in that careful English he used. "Don't overthink it," he said after her 100th wild miss. "The bullseye ain't the target. The target's the line between you, the arrow, the bow, and what you mean to do." She didn't get it completely, but she drew again anyway, again and again. Then, out of nowhere, everything clicked. Her body lined up right, breath locked, and in that split-second hush between one beat and the next, she let fly. The arrow cut clean air and buried itself dead center in the bark slab with a satisfying thwack that bounced off the canyon walls. A low ripple of approval moved through the watchers. Vera turned to Kyle, half expecting a grin or a pat on the back. He just gave one short nod. Respect, not praise. "Good," he said flat. "Now do it again." And so the real work began, learning to become someone new. Days blurred into a steady rhythm. Dawn bow drills followed by lessons in the land's secrets. Tindra knelt with her in the dust, pointing out plants that could keep a body going, prickly pear pads swollen with water and sweet fruit, agave hearts roasted slow for their sugary meat, cacti flesh sliced thin when hunger bit hardest. "The desert gives," Tindra said, squatting beside what looked like bare dirt, "but you gotta know how to ask." She showed Vera how to dig shallow for roots, spot the faint green blush signaling hidden water, read the ground like an open trail journal full of survival stories. Vera's hands, once soft for china cups and fine stitching, turned tough and scarred, nails splitting then hardening to fit the work of staying alive. The camp kids, shy at first, started drifting closer with wide-eyed curiosity. They taught her to weave tight baskets from tough yucca and grass, their tiny fingers flying while hers fumbled and learned. They giggled at her clumsy attempts at their words, but corrected her gently, patiently. And through every day, Kyle was there, not always right beside her, but never far. She got used to his quiet way of moving through camp, smooth as water around rocks, earning respect not with loud demands, but with plain competence everyone recognized. Some evenings, when the fire pulled everyone in close, she'd catch him watching her across the flames. His face stayed unreadable in the shifting light, but the look in his eyes sent her heart kicking in ways that had nothing to do with the day's hard work. "Today we hunt," Kyle announced at first light, his voice carrying the weight of ceremony. The whole camp hummed with a different charge that morning. Sharp purpose, quiet excitement Vera could feel in her bones, even if she didn't fully understand it yet. They readied everything with care. Arrows counted twice, bows restrung with fresh sinew, faces painted in earth tones, ochre streaks and charcoal lines that sharpened features like war masks. Even the kids pitched in, packing extra water pouches and trail food for the hunters. "You're coming," Kyle told her. No question in it. Her heart slammed against her ribs. 2 weeks of bow practice had sharpened her aim some, but real hunting, taking game the people relied on, stirred equal parts thrill and cold fear. They moved out as the sun crested the eastern rim, 6 of them total. Kyle in front, his younger cousin Slate right behind, then 2 other men whose names she was still learning, Vera in the middle, and old Drake closing the line. They walked single file along trails she couldn't even see, pace steady but never rushed, every foot placed to miss loose rock or noisy sand. No one talked much, only quick hand signs or murmurs so soft they barely stirred the air. Vera found herself studying Kyle as they went. Out here he flowed into the land like he was part of it, feet picking the right spots without thought, head sweeping slow arcs, forward, sides, canyon rims, back trail, always reading the country. "Look," he breathed after about an hour, crouching and pointing to a patch of disturbed earth. "Mule deer. 2, maybe 3 days old." She stared hard, seeing nothing at first. Then slowly the signs appeared. Faint hoof prints, sand nudged just so, a few dry pellets half hidden in the scrub. "How do you know the age?" she whispered. "Edges," he said, tracing the track with a finger. "See how they soften? Rain. Wind. Time, all leave their mark. Pellets dry, but ants ain't scattered 'em yet. Country tells stories if you listen." They tracked another hour before Cale raised a hand. Flat, silent. Everyone froze. Ahead, tucked low among a thick stand of juniper, sat a jackrabbit. Not the mule deer they'd been trailing, but meat on the hoof all the same. Kyle glanced at Vera, then lifted his chin in a small, clear signal towards the animal. The meaning hit her like a punch. This one was hers. Her fingers shook as she nocked an arrow, the weight of every eye in the hunting party pressing down on her back. The rabbit held perfectly still, almost posing, big dark eyes liquid and calm, ears flicking now and then at sounds she couldn't hear. She drew the bow, calling up every lesson from the past weeks. Anchor point, steady breath. Don't think. Feel the line between you, the arrow, the bow, and your will. The string kissed her cheek, feathers brushing her ear. In that frozen instant she heard her own heart thumping, felt the bow's tension humming through every muscle. The rabbit's bright eye locked on hers, alive, unaware, innocent. For one heartbeat, she froze. Back in Boston, meat arrived clean and wrapped from the butcher, death kept at arm's length. Here, though, survival meant facing the full circle, life feeding life, no excuses, no hiding. She let go. The arrow sliced clean, punching through the neck. The rabbit dropped without a twitch, without pain. A storm of feelings crashed through her. Sharp triumph at the hit, relief that it had been quick and kind, and something heavier. Sorrow tangled with deep gratitude. Kyle moved fast, kneeling beside the small body. He laid a gentle hand on its head, murmuring soft words in his tongue that sounded like a quiet prayer of thanks. Then he pulled her arrow free, wiped it clean with care, and placed it back in her hand. "You took your first life to keep others breathing," he said, voice low and solemn. "We honor this creature's spirit for giving so we can live." The other men nodded, faces serious with respect. Slate clapped her shoulder once, short, firm, hunter to hunter. Even Drake, who'd eyed her with doubt at the start, let out a low grunt that might have passed for approval. As they readied to move on, Kyle handed her the rabbit. "You killed it. You prepare it. Tonight, offer the first cut to the elders. Honor their wisdom. Then we feast." The little body felt heavier than it should in her palms. This wasn't just a kill. It was a crossing, over an unseen line from watcher to doer, from outsider to something closer to belonging. The word member felt too big, too soon. But the way the others looked at her now had shifted. She'd shown she could give back to the group's survival. Walking back to camp, Vera carried herself different. Straighter, more sure-footed, more awake to the ground under her boots and the dry air on her skin. She'd taken a life, yes, but in that act, she'd started to truly live in this hard, honest world. The river roared ahead, swollen fat with snowmelt from the high peaks, water the color of pale jade flecked with ice. It rushed with raw, ancient power, waters that had gouged canyons and worn mountains down over endless time. The noise was alive, thunder where it smashed against boulders, a steady song in the deep channels, sly whispers in the swirling eddies. Vera stood on the bank, caught by the terrible beauty of it all. Nothing in her life had prepared her for this untamed force, beautiful and deadly, mocking anything human dared to claim, promising life and death in the same breath. The Missouri had been wide and lazy, the little creeks on the trail easy to ford with caution. This was different, wild, unstoppable. "You have to cross," Kyle said quietly from beside her. She stared at him, sure she'd misheard. "Cross. Look at it, Kyle. It'd sweep me away in seconds." "True," he agreed, calm as ever. "If you cross, stupid, but there are ways." He led her upstream a short distance to where the river spread wider, current thinning over a broader bed. There, barely breaking the surface, lay a rough line of rocks stretching to the far bank like a broken string of beads, some slick and shining, others just peeking above the foam. "Crossing stones," Kyle explained. "They're always here, but the river reshapes them every season. You gotta read 'em fresh each time." He went first, stepping light and sure across the treacherous path, moving like a dancer who knew every dip and slant by heart. His feet found purchase without hesitation, body flowing with each stone's quirks. On the far side, he turned and motioned her forward. Vera's pulse hammered. She took the first step off solid ground, boots slipping on wet rock, current tugging at her legs like hungry hands. Vera's first step off the bank felt like stepping onto ice. The rock was slick as greased glass, worn smooth by endless years of rushing water, giving her boots almost nothing to grip. Beneath the surface, the current grabbed at her legs like cold fingers, yanking downstream toward the white roar of rapids she could hear thundering in the distance. She reached the second stone, arms flailing wildly for balance, heart pounding so hard it lodged in her throat. By the fourth rock, she was already in deep trouble. The gaps wider, the stones more rounded and treacherous. She leaped anyway, landed off-center, felt her foot slide. For one endless, gut-twisting second, she teetered on the brink, the river below waiting open-mouthed and hungry. Then she fell. The water hit like a slap of pure ice, so cold it punched the air from her lungs in a violent gasp. The current seized her instantly, dragging her downstream with brutal, indifferent power. She thrashed to swim, but the river laughed at her efforts. Too strong, too vast. Rocks raked her shins and elbows, bruising deep, Water flooded her mouth and nose, cold and metallic, burning all the way down. Strong hands clamped around her arms, yanking her up like a hooked trout. Kyle hauled her onto a narrow gravel bar where she collapsed, coughing up river water in heaving spasms, gulping air like she'd never breathe again. Her whole body quaked. Cold, shock, raw fear. "Again," he said once she could draw breath. She stared up at him, incredulous. "Are you crazy? I almost drowned." "Yes," he answered calmly. "And now you know what the river can do. Now you can respect it." He made her try again. All through that long day, she attempted the crossing, over and over. Sometimes she managed 3 stones, sometimes 5, once a miraculous 7 before the water won. Each time she slipped, Kyle was there, pulling her out faster every fall, as though he felt the exact instant she lost her balance. Her clothes turned heavy and clinging, her body racked with violent shivers, but something fierce inside refused to break. Maybe it was pride, maybe pure, stubborn will, or maybe the dawning realization that this was another trial, another skill that could spell the difference between seeing another sunrise or not in this merciless country. By late afternoon, with the sun turning the canyon walls to glowing amber and rose, something shifted inside her. Her body began to sense the stone's rhythm, the current's pull, the exact shift of weight needed to stay upright. She finally understood what Kyle had been teaching. Not just how to cross this one river, but how to read any water. Honor its strength, learn its patterns, use what it gave without fighting it. When she finally stepped onto the far bank without falling, the sun was dipping low. Soaked, shaking, teeth chattering, she turned and grinned at Kyle through the cold. He gave her the first real smile she'd ever seen from him. Wide, boyish, warming his usually stern face like sunlight breaking through clouds. "Good," he said softly. "Tomorrow we do it when the river's in flood." There was a new warmth in his voice now, something gentle that hadn't been there before. That night, huddled by the fire wrapped in borrowed furs and still fighting shivers, he pressed another small carved stone into her palm. This one showed water pouring smooth over rock, lines so fine the stone seemed to ripple in the firelight. "For persistence," he said quietly. "For not quitting when the river calls." She curled her fingers around it, feeling its cool, smooth weight settle alongside the other tokens she carried. 2 stones now, 2 hard lessons, 2 careful steps along a path she couldn't yet see to the end. She didn't know where it led, but for the first time she trusted it would show her in time. The change stole in, slow, like the quiet turn from summer heat to fall chill. So subtle Vera almost missed it, until one day she realized the women no longer hushed when she walked near. Kids raced up with questions and games, tugging her sleeve. The men started including her in talk of coming weather and where the herds might move next. It began small. Tindra started handing her tasks to do alone, gathering healing herbs, keeping the cook fire steady, scraping hides for tanning. Vera knew these weren't just jobs. They were trials, chances to prove she was growing capable. She tackled each one with steady grit, aware that a slip could push her back, but success edged her closer to something unnamed and vital. The morning she finally sparked her first fire, the old way, rubbing prepared sticks until friction birthed flame, she glanced up to see several women watching with quiet approval. No one said a word, but the small nods and shared looks spoke volumes. Decisions were being made. "You pick things up fast," Tindra said that afternoon as they worked side by side on a fresh deer hide. "Most outsiders see only the surface, think our ways are simple because they miss the layers underneath." Vera paused her scraping, letting the words sink in. I'm just starting to see how much I still don't know." Tindra's hands stilled on the hide. "That right there is wisdom. Knowing what you don't know. Plenty never learn it." After that, their talks deepened. Tindra shared pieces of her growing up years, the old traditions slowly bending under pressure from the outside world creeping closer. She told stories of her grandmother, who'd wielded healing gifts that felt almost like magic, and her father, who'd guided the people through hard seasons when white travelers first pushed in heavy numbers. Tindra spoke of those early days when white wagons started rolling in thicker, changing the land bit by bit. "We've learned to bend," she said quietly, scraping the hide with steady strokes. "Take what helps from the newcomers. Hold tight to what keeps our hearts true. It's a hard line to walk." Vera listened and thought of her own old life. The stiff rules of Boston drawing rooms, the iron weight of what society expected from women, how a woman's very survival seemed chained to a husband's name and protection. Here she was discovering something sharper, standing strong on her own without being cut off, belonging to a circle without losing who she was. The children took to her fastest, with that pure, no-strings trust only the young have. They pulled her into games of string figures and bone dice, sang her their counting tunes in soft voices, dragged her into tag and hide-and-seek like she'd always been one of them. Watching their mothers' faces over the play, Vera caught the quiet measuring behind the gentle smiles. Kids were the true pulse of any camp. How she treated them told everything about her heart. One night, as the people gathered tight around the main fire, the oldest woman walked straight to her, tall and straight-backed even in her years, hair white as winter frost, face lined with hard-won knowing. She carried the calm command of someone who'd seen seasons come and go, and still stood firm. "Vera," she said, motioning her to stand. "You've walked with us one full moon now. You've taken in our ways, eaten our food, given life so others could eat. The spirits have spoken through what you do." The whole circle went still, faces turning toward them in the fire's glow. Vera felt the moment settle heavy on her shoulders. She knew something big was unfolding, even if she didn't know the right words to meet it. The old woman extended her hand. In her palm rested a small leather pouch, beautiful with tiny bead patterns that caught the flames. "This was my grandmother's," she said. "She was a strong medicine woman. It's waited for the right hands to carry it on." Vera took it with trembling fingers, feeling the deep honor and the heavier responsibility wrapped inside. I don't understand. I'm not—" "You are what you decide to become," the woman cut in firmly. "We see your spirit. We see your courage. We see your heart. If you choose to walk our path and learn the medicine ways, this belongs to you." Vera looked around the ring of faces lit by firelight and saw something that stole her breath. Real welcome. Not the grudging nod she'd braced for, not the polite guest treatment, but true belonging. These people were offering her a place, a purpose, a tomorrow she'd never dared dream of. "I choose," she whispered, then stronger. "I choose to stay, to learn, to belong." The old woman, Elowen, nodded once, satisfied, and pressed the pouch into her hands. Around the fire, voices lifted in a song Vera was starting to know. A low, rising chant of welcome, of chosen paths, of the ties that hold a people together. Later, alone in the quiet, she opened the pouch. Inside lay herbs she couldn't name yet, a small crystal that sparkled like trapped starlight, and a scrap of hide marked with symbols she couldn't read but somehow felt. Talk of mending and guarding. That night she slipped the pouch under her furs next to the growing handful of carved stones, each one a marker of a lesson hard won. She was turning into something fresh, something without a name yet. Not Eastern lady, not of the people here, but maybe a bridge between, or something altogether new. The evening fires became her heartbeat now, time measured not by clocks, but by shared tales, learned songs, and silences deep enough to rest in. Vera found herself looking forward to those gatherings, with a warmth she hadn't felt since she was a girl waiting for Christmas morning. The deep comfort of being part of something bigger, woven into a pattern made of many lives. Cale took to sitting close beside her these nights, near enough that their shoulders brushed when he leaned to feed the flames, a small pocket of warmth blooming between them. She'd grown easy with him nearby, but lately the air between them felt alive, full of unspoken questions, electric with what-ifs. "Tell us about the big towns again," one of the children begged, snuggling closer against her side. "The ones with buildings that scrape the sky?" Vera smiled and told them of Boston's tallest spires, trying to paint pictures of floors stacked high for minds used to homes hugging the earth. But as the words came out, she heard herself seeing the city new, through eyes that now knew the sense of building with the land instead of against it, letting homes breathe with the seasons instead of battling them. "But how do folks find each other and all that?" Tindra asked, brow creased in honest wonder. "So many people. How do you know who to trust? Who shares when your cupboard's bare? Who watches your young ones when you're down?" The questions cut straight to the bone. Vera thought of the boarding house she'd shared with Thane. 3 years side by side with neighbors whose names she barely knew. Polite walls of distance, rules that kept everyone alone even in a crowd. "We had ways," she said slowly. "Churches, clubs, work ties. But you're right. It was different. Stiffer. Less." She waved a hand at the warm circle around the fire. "Less like kin." The eldest woman nodded slow, understanding in her eyes. "So you traded real connection for what? What did that aloneness buy you?" The question hung there like smoke. Vera searched for an answer and came up empty. Privacy, maybe. The idea of standing alone. The pretend of not needing anyone. But sitting here, wrapped in the glow of people who'd saved her life and folded her in like family, those things rang hollow as an empty canteen. "I don't know anymore," she admitted, voice soft in the firelight. Kyle's hand slipped into hers in the shadows beyond the fire's glow, fingers weaving together in a way that felt easy, yet heavy with meaning. When she looked up, his eyes were locked on her face with a quiet fire that set her heart racing faster. Later, after the flames had died to embers and most folks had slipped off to their shelters, they stayed on, hands still joined, sitting in the cool dark. The desert night stretched clear overhead, stars flung across black velvet like scattered silver coins. Far off a night bird called once. Another answered from the canyon depths. "In my old life," Vera said low, "a woman on her own was wide open, helpless, needing a man for safety, for a name, for any chance at getting by." "And now?" Cale asked, voice soft against the quiet. She thought back over the past 2 months, the miles she'd crossed inside herself. "Now I'm finding out I can stand strong by myself. But I'm also learning that picking someone to walk beside you, really choosing, can make you both tougher, better." His thumb moved slow circles across her palm, a steady rhythm that sent gentle heat traveling up her arm. "My people say the strongest bonds come when 2 whole folks decide to stand together. Not because they're missing something, but because they want to build more than either could alone." The words floated between them. Not quite a promise, but close enough to taste. Vera felt nerves and thrill twist together in her chest. This was worlds away from what she'd had with Thane, built on what folks expected, on marriage as the next box to check in a proper life. This felt rawer, truer. A choice born from strength instead of fear, from want instead of need. "Is that what you're putting on the table?" she asked, surprised at her own boldness. Cale's smile broke slow and rare, lighting his whole face like dawn cracking the horizon. "I'm not offering anything yet. Just feeling out what might grow between us, natural and easy. No pushing." She squeezed his hand, grateful for the patience he gave her. Back east, courtship ran on strict rails, timetables set by society. Here, it seemed things could unfold at their own speed, led by honest feeling instead of rules. "I like that," she said plain. They sat quiet after that, hands locked, watching the stars turn slow overhead. Vera felt a peace she hadn't touched in months, maybe years, the simple, deep joy of being right where she fit, with exactly who she wanted, for no reason, but it felt true. When they finally stood to head to their separate beds, Kyle helped her up, then paused. "Vera," he said gentle, "you've carried something fresh into our camp. A new way of looking, of thinking. It's welcome here." She rose on her toes and pressed a quick kiss to his cheek, both of them startled by it. "Thank you," she whispered, "for pulling me out of that desert, for teaching me, for waiting." His fingers brushed the spot she'd kissed. She caught a flash in his eyes that stole her breath, but he only nodded and stepped back, giving her room to set her own pace. She lay awake long into the night, turning over the heart's strange ways, how it could carry sorrow for one love while slowly opening to another, without breaking faith with either. Thane would always be part of her trail, but she was starting to see her road stretched far ahead. Dawn brought the dream, sharp as a knife, yanking her awake with pictures clearer than the shelter walls, wagons rolling distant, voices calling her name, dust thick and bitter on her tongue. Vera jolted up, heart slamming with a warning she couldn't shake. The feeling clung through morning chores, gathering firewood, stirring breakfast, helping Tindra hang herbs to dry for winter. But when she climbed her favorite perch on the canyon rim to catch the sunrise, she saw them. Not dream this time, real shapes hardening out of the heat haze. 3 wagons crawling slow across the red flats, canvas tops pale ghosts against the rock. Even far off she knew the lead rig, the oxen's hitch, the wheel ruts they cut, the colonists, her old people, coming back. For a second her lungs locked, every ounce of terror, shame, and raw hurt from the day they'd left her to die flooded back. Gideon Voss's icy stare, Mira Thorne turning her face away, the casual way they'd walked off like she was already gone. But the panic she braced for didn't hit. Instead came a strange calm, like watching someone else's story play out. She hurried down the trail, breath short, and found Kyle sharpening a spear outside his shelter. "They're coming," she said fast, words tumbling out. He looked up quick, reading her face. "Your old folks?" "Yes, 3 wagons, moving in from the east." He set the spear aside and stood. "How's that sitting with you?" She weighed it. "Angry, I reckon. But curious, too. And maybe a little like I've been proven right." Tindra stepped up beside Kyle, catching the tail of it. "What are you gonna do?" Vera's hand went to the medicine pouch at her neck, fingers brushing the carved stones like touchstones of who she'd become. "I need to look them in the eye. Face it head on." "You don't have to," Kyle said, gentle. "We can send them off, or you can stay out of sight." "No." Her voice came firm. "I've come too far to hide now. Besides, I want them to see. I want them to understand what they tried to throw away." Word flew fast through the camp, like dry grass catching spark. Preparations kicked in quick, not for a fight, but for a careful parley with strangers who'd shown up uninvited. Elders huddled close, voices low and steady, hashing out the right way to greet outsiders while keeping their own safe and strong. As the people readied themselves, Vera's mind drifted not just to the wagons coming, but to the woman she'd been the last time those folks knew her. Back then, she'd stood frozen while they weighed her life like cargo and found it wanting, swallowing their verdict like it came straight from on high, convinced she couldn't make it without their shelter. That woman was dead and buried, gone as surely as if the desert had claimed her for good. In her place stood someone new, someone Vera was still learning the shape of. A hunter who could bring down game. A healer who knew the plant's secrets. A firemaker who could coax flame from dry sticks. A woman rooted in a circle that prized what she gave instead of sighing over what she lacked. "Remember," Tindra said, fingers deft as she wove Vera's hair into a tight traditional braid laced with small beads and feathers. "You ain't that lost soul they walked away from anymore. You're one of us now. Let 'em see the truth staring back." As the sun climbed hotter, dust clouds rose far off, the wagons pushing on slow but stubborn across the rough ground. Vera slipped into the buckskin dress Tindra had helped her sew, adding the simple jewelry and face paint that marked her place among the people. She caught her reflection in a quiet basin of still water and barely recognized the woman looking back. Skin bronzed dark by sun and wind, body leaner and harder from hard days, moving with a quiet sureness she'd never owned before. But her eyes held the biggest shift. Deeper now, carrying stories and hard-won knowing that hadn't been there 2 months back. "They won't know you," Kyle said, stepping up behind her. "Not just the outside changes. You hold yourself different now." "I am different," she answered straight. "I don't think I could step back into who I was, even if I tried." He set his hands on her shoulders, steady support, and something more, a silent claim that she belonged here, no matter what ghosts from her past came riding up. "Whatever they bring, whatever words they throw, the choice is yours," he told her. "We'll stand by whatever you decide." She laid her hands over his, grateful for the trust he gave so freely. Back in her old world, men called the shots for women, picked what was safe, shielded them from hard calls. Here she was handed real power, the scary, thrilling freedom to chart her own trail. "I know my answer," she said quiet. "I've known it for weeks, but I need to face them square, need to shut that old book for good." The wagons rolled closer. She could pick out faces now, worn thin, beaten down by a winter meaner than they'd figured. Fewer heads than before, and the empty spots hit her with a pang of pity she hadn't expected. Some hadn't made it through the cold months, but memory tempered the feeling quick. The way they'd huddled to debate her fate, cool-headed math that set her life against dwindling supplies and came up short, the easy cruelty of leaving her behind dressed up as hard necessity. "They're here!" a voice called from the rim. Vera drew a deep breath, centering herself the way Kyle had shown her before tough shots. Steady feet, calm mind. Then she walked toward the camp's edge, each step shedding the old skin, carrying the new woman she'd become to meet the past that had scarred her, but no longer owned her. The people moved with sharp purpose, every soul knowing their part in the old ritual of meeting outsiders. Young ones were herded closer to the main shelters, weapons kept handy but out of sight. Elders took spots with clear views, holding council dignity without show of threat. Vera watched it all with fresh eyes. This wasn't just about her. It was the whole camp's safety, their right to stand on their own ground. The colonists carried more than wagons. They hauled ideas about fences and deeds, about who owned what, about whose ways counted as proper. "You get it now," Tindra murmured, catching her look. "Why trust comes slow and earned? Your folks don't just bring supplies. They bring notions that push people off their land, that decide who's civilized and who ain't." The weight of her spot hit Vera hard. She stood between two worlds, for good or ill, What she said today, how she carried herself, could ripple out, touching not just her future, but how this camp met the next strangers who rolled through. Kyle came up with her bow and quiver. "If you stand with us, let them see you as one of us." She understood the meaning right off. Weapons in hand would shout her loyalty, her change from helpless cast-off to full member of a fighting people. But it could spook the newcomers too, turn talk into trouble fast. "What do you say?" she asked him. His eyes held hers steady, long and searching. "Be true to who you are now. Everything else follows." She took the bow, feeling its familiar heft settle into her palm like it belonged there, an extension of her arm and will. After a beat of thought, she reached for the quiver, too, slinging it so the arrows showed plain but stayed easy. No threat, just truth. As she steadied her mind for what was coming, the women closed in around her like a quiet ceremony, though nobody called it that. They smoothed her braid, tugged the dress straight, checked every bead and feather sat right. "Remember that jackrabbit?" Slate said with a quick grin. "Your first clean kill? You spilled blood for us now. You ain't just passing through anymore." "Remember the river, too," another woman added low. "You stared death down and picked life. They can't steal that from you." Tindra pressed a small bundle wrapped in soft leather into her palm. "For today," she said. "Open it when the time's right." Last came Elowen, the elder whose medicine pouch now hung at Vera's neck. Her lined hands moved gentle as she drew traditional lines of paint across Vera's cheeks, marks that said she stood under the people's shield. "True strength grows from knowing exactly who you are." She spoke first in the old tongue, then clear in English, so Vera caught every word. "You've earned your name among us. Don't let old ghosts steal the light from your days." When the last touch was done, Vera felt the world tilt inside her. The knot of worry she'd carried about facing the colonists had loosened. Now she stood rooted, sure in the woman she'd forged. They were riding into her country now, stepping onto ground she claimed. She'd meet them not as the cast-off they'd left behind, but as the one who'd risen from that place. The men had formed a loose half-circle facing the incoming trail. Not war stance, but ready, watchful. Kyle stood at the center, leaving an open spot at his side clearly meant for her. Vera walked to it, feeling every gaze, camp folks and newcomers alike, locked on her. This was her line in the sand. Standing beside Kale didn't just mean her heart. It declared she'd chosen this life, this family, full and final. As she moved, her fingers brushed each token, the carved stones, the medicine pouch, Tindra's new gift, each one anchoring her deeper in the now she'd fought for. The sun stood high when Gideon Voss finally raised a hand and halted the wagons. They drew up in a ragged line 30 yards out, close enough for talk, far enough for caution. The oxen blew hard and shifted, worn thin from the rough haul. Voss climbed down stiff from the lead rig, legs slow from long days in the seat. Mira Thorne followed, mouth still pinched tight with that old disapproval. Young Finn peeked from the second wagon, curiosity winning over caution. But what struck Vera hardest were the empty places. Whole families gone. Faces she'd expected to see missing forever. Winter had collected its toll from the very people who'd once figured they could afford to leave one of their own behind. She felt Kyle at her side, like steady warmth, solid without crowding. The bow in her grip felt good, its weight a quiet reminder of sweat-earned skill and the confidence she'd built from nothing. "Let them walk up," she murmured to Kyle. "Let them look at what they made when they thought they were breaking me." Voss came on slow, steps careful, the way a man learns when he's riding into country he doesn't know. He stopped 10 feet off, weathered face twisting as he tried to fit the woman in front of him into his old picture. "Mrs. Flint," he said, voice thick with disbelief, and maybe a flicker of relief. "Vera, is that really you?" She eased forward just enough to speak private, but stayed close to Cale, showing where her loyalty lay. "It's Vera," she answered, voice level. "Not Mrs. Flint anymore. Just Vera." Voss pulled off his hat, dragged a hand through hair gone grayer since last she saw him. Close up, the winter had carved new lines around his eyes, tightened his mouth with the look of hard calls and harder nights. "My God," he let out, eyes traveling her over slow. You're alive?" she finished when words failed him. "Yeah, I made it." "But how? We figured when we left you. No water for miles, no cover, nothing." He trailed off, maybe hearing how it sounded out loud. "When you left me to die," she said, gentle but straight. "These folks found me. They pulled me back from the edge and showed me how to stand on my own." Mira Thorne had edged closer, face drawn tight with unease. "It wasn't like that, Vera. We were scraping bottom. Quarter rations, oxen dropping, winter closing in fast. Winter was breathing down our necks." "Stop!" The word sliced through her justifications like a sharp knife, carrying unexpected weight. Vera felt a chill take hold in her chest. Not rage, exactly, but a clear, sharp insight into the talk unfolding between them. "You ran the numbers," she went on. "You balanced my life against your ease and came up short. I get it. I might have done the same if I'd been calling the shots." That honest admission seemed to knock some wind out of Voss's sails. "We came back for you, Vera. Soon as the pass opened, we stocked up and hit the trail. We couldn't stomach leaving you behind like that." Behind her, Vera caught the faint rustle of warriors shifting, ready if words turned ugly. The colonists had riflemen too, she saw now. Thinner ranks than before, but enough to matter. The air crackled thick with strain. "Where'd you hole up over winter?" she asked, curiosity real. "Fort Bridger," Finn yelled from the wagon. "Backtracked for supplies, lost 8 to fever, hunkered down when storms hit early." It all clicked. They'd missed California, turned tail, taken their own licks from hardship. Fetching her wasn't pure heart. It was admitting they could use her now, that lone women weren't dead weight anymore. "We want you with us to California," Voss said, forcing a light tone. "Set things square. Got space in the Thorn wagon now, extra grub too." The offhand nod to how that spot opened up, through graves, no doubt, struck Vera as cold-blooded practical. But watching a buzzard wheel lazy overhead, she knew survival often called for that kind of grit. "Look at me, Gideon," she said, dropping his first name on purpose. "Really see." She stood proud in her buckskin, hair braided traditional, bow and arrows slung easy like they belonged. Around her neck the tokens gleamed in the sun, badges of hard lessons, freely given gifts, proof of a spot earned in a circle that saw her worth. "I ain't the woman you dumped anymore. I hunt my own food now, sniff out waterholes, read the sky for storms, mend with plants. I cross killer rivers and trail game over dirt that looks blank to green eyes. I can make it solo if push comes." She waved back at the people behind her. "But I don't gotta. I found kin here. Folks who see what I bring to the fire, not what I lack. Folks who saved me not after tallying costs, but 'cause it was right." Voss's jaw clenched silent. She watched the light dawn in his eyes. This wasn't a pickup anymore. This was calling back a thing that had grown a mind of its own. "But you can't mean to live like this," Mira Thorne broke in sharp, voice dripping disbelief. "These are wild men, Vera. Pagans. You're a good Christian raised to spread civilization. You belong with us, your own blood." The word wild men hung heavy. Vera sensed the people tense like drawn bows. Kyle's hand edged toward his knife. "These wild men," she said measured, "took me in when I was circling the drain. They taught me tricks your fine society never bothered with. They saw me as a person who could learn and pull her weight, not some load to dump when times got tight." She knocked an arrow smooth as breathing, the move baked into her muscles from endless drills. With calm aim, she pulled and let fly, the shaft hissing past Voss's ear to thunk into a dead snag 30 feet back. The colonists jumped, hands jerking toward irons. Around her came the soft creak of boughs drawing in answer to the scare. "No," she shouted, first in English, then in the people's tongue, free hand up in a peace sign. The standoff held a breath, then eased slow as both sides clocked the shot for show. Not war. "I can guard my own back now," she said soft. "I don't need saving from a thing." Quiet fell after her display, stretching wide across the flats like a drawn-out sigh. Vera felt two worlds' eyes on her, waiting for her to pick her side. "I used to think," she started slow, "my only roads were wife or worthless, that my worth came from tending others, from being needed in someone else's setup. That alone meant helpless." She scanned the groups, colonists standing for all she'd been raised to chase, the people who'd shown her a wider path. "I had it wrong." Gideon Voss shifted uneasy. "Vera, think hard. These are your kin. We talk your tongue, share your God, know your ways. What kind of life is this out here?" "A real one," she shot back fast. "One where I'm tough enough to go it alone, but lucky not to need to. Where my hands can mend wounds and bring down game. Where my say carries weight around the fire. Where folks see my worth for who I stand as, not whose shadow I walk in. Non-trafuri." "And what about the Lord?" Mira Thorne cut in, voice edged sharp. "What about your Christian soul?" Vera smiled slow, thinking back to the quiet thanks Cale had shown her over fresh kills, the deep respect for water and dirt that ran through everything here. "I've met God out in this desert in ways a church bench never showed me. Maybe the Almighty talks in tongues we ain't always listening for." She shifted just enough to take in both sides. Colonists carrying the world she'd grown up in, the people who'd opened her eyes to something wider. "You rode back for me, and I'm thankful. Takes backbone to own a wrong. But I ain't the woman you left to the buzzards. That woman passed on in the sand. What stands here now is somebody new." Finn, barely old enough for whiskers, piped up from the wagon, voice cutting clean through the grown-up talk. "Ma'am, if it ain't too bold, are you really happy out here?" Vera let the question settle, tasting it against the months she'd lived. "Happy?" She turned the word over. "I've learned it ain't about dodging hard times. It's finding purpose in the thick of 'em. Out here I've struck a calling I never even knew to look for." She reached into the little pouch Tindra had given her and drew out the small wooden figure. A woman gripping a bow in one hand, a sheaf of grain in the other, carved to show the balance of fighter and caretaker. "This is me now," she said, holding it high. "Not one side or the other, but all I've got strength to be." Kyle stepped up then, not to talk over her, but to stand shoulder to shoulder, a silent promise he'd back whatever road she picked. His nearness called to mind every way he'd pushed her to rise, never once trying to reshape her core. "If I may," he said with careful respect, nodding to Voss like one man to another. "I'd like a word on this." Voss dipped his head, seeming to grasp this went beyond claiming a woman's future. "She came to us nameless in our tongue," Kyle went on. "Now she's earned one, ashen, walker between trails, crossing worlds without losing her own self. She carries gifts from both sides, know-how, fresh sight, understanding, rare as good water in dry country." He turned to her, dark eyes warm yet full of respect for her own say-so. "But she ain't a thing to be owned. She's a woman who picks her own trail." The moment hung heavy as desert dust settling after a wind. Vera felt it clear. This wasn't about dirt underfoot anymore. It was about who she was, the life she meant to carve, the self she aimed to become. "I choose," she said, voice ringing clear over the flats, "to keep walking the road I've started here, to stay with folks who've shown me I'm tougher than I knew, gentler than I thought, stronger than I ever figured." She locked eyes with Voss. "I'm grateful you came back, truly. But the woman you're hunting don't exist no more. In her place stands somebody who's found her home." The words landed final as a closing gate. Voss's shoulders eased a touch, but respect flickered in his nod. "I see," he said quiet. The wagons rolled out soft. No big scenes, no drawn-out goodbyes. The colonists took her choice with a mix of confusion and hard-won respect, packing up in the cool gray before sunup, while the desert still held night's easy chill. When the last rig faded over the rise, Vera felt no pullback, no second-guessing, just a clean sense of things finished, like the last chord of a song dying away. One stretch of her trail had ended. The next was already under her boots. She turned and found Cale waiting, steady as sunrise. "Come on," he said simple. "Got something to show you." They took the familiar climb to the canyon rim and kept going, following faint signs only he could read. The sun rose higher, brushing the land in wide sweeps of gold and soft pink. They walked easy, steps matching in a rhythm built over weeks of shared miles. At last they stepped out on a high point overlooking the sweep of her new country. Red mesas standing guard like old sentinels, deep canyons cut slow by water, far blue mountains still dusted white with winter. The view ran endless yet close, vast and personal all at once. "This is where our young ones come to seek vision," Kyle explained. "When they need their trail clear, need to feel their spot in the big weave." Vera knew without asking what it meant. He was handing her something holy, sealing her shift from stranger to true kin. She drew out her tokens. The carved stones for lessons carved into her, the medicine pouch from Elowen, the little wooden woman from Tindra. To them she added now the knowing carried in her bones, how to coax water from dry ground, track game over bare rock, heal with desert plants, read the sky's quiet talk of weather and change. "I got something to say," she told him, heart picking up speed. "Through all these months of learning, of turning into somebody new, I've found one more thing." She turned full to him, meeting those deep eyes changed by sun and hard-won truth. "I've learned the strongest ties come free, chosen from a full heart, not from empty need." Kyle's face softened, warmth spreading across it like first light breaking over the rim rock. "And what do you choose, Vera?" She smiled, remembering the formal way he'd asked questions back in those early days. But this felt deeper now, straight to the heart, not just about staying alive. "I choose you," she said simply. "I choose this life, this hard country, these people. But most of all, I choose you." His hands found hers, rough from bowstring and stonework, yet gentle as a promise. "And I choose you," he answered. "I've been choosing you since the day I found you half dead in the sand. I just waited for you to find your own way first." They stood there a long time, hands clasped, gazing out over the endless desert that had broken them both and built them back stronger. High above, an eagle rode the thermal, wings casting slow shadows across the red rock. "What happens next?" Vera asked, though she already sensed the answer. "Now," Kyle said, drawing her close. "We build something together. We hunt, we gather, we raise kids who know the old ways and the new ones, we serve our people, mark the seasons, honor the spirits that keep us going. And we love each other." "And we love each other," she echoed, smiling at the rare, full grin that lit his face, fierce like the eagle, steady like the canyon walls. As if the land itself heard them, a sudden wind rose, carrying the sharp scent of sage and the faint promise of rain. Relief for the thirsty ground below. Far down in the camp, she could see figures moving. Daily work, ancient patterns that had held this people together for generations. Vera no longer felt caught between worlds. She'd found her true place in the big weave. Not white, not of the people here, but something whole and new. A bridge, sure, but also a woman complete in her own right. As they started down the trail toward camp, Kyle caught her hand and stopped her. From a pouch at his belt, he drew another small carved stone and placed it in her palm. She saw it was different. Two figures twined together, lines so fine they seemed to move in the fading light. "For us," he said quiet. "For what we're building." She closed her fingers around it, feeling its weight settle alongside the others she carried. 4 stones now, each one marking a change, a hard lesson, a choice freely taken. The woman the desert had swallowed had truly died, but from that death had risen someone tougher, wiser, more fully herself than she'd ever been. The fire's crackle drifted up from below, calling them back to supper, to stories and songs that bound them all. Together they turned toward the light, walking side by side across the land that had tested her, shattered her, and finally shaped her into something greater than she'd ever dreamed possible. As they neared the camp, Vera felt belonging settle over her shoulders like a well-worn blanket. Warm, familiar, fitting just right. Children ran out to meet them. Women called them to the fire. Men gave quiet nods of welcome. This was her family now, her home, her tomorrow. She smiled into the gathering dusk, finally understanding. Home wasn't a spot on the map, but a choice. Not a place to arrive, but a path to walk. Not something you own, but something you become. And she had become exactly who she was meant to be. Ashen, hunter, healer, teacher, beloved, and free. Above them, the stars began their nightly wheel, the same constellations she'd known since childhood, yet seen fresh from this new ground. Tomorrow would bring new trials, new teachings, new joys. But tonight, with Kale's hand warm in hers and the fire calling them home, she stood exactly where she belonged. The desert wind lifted its old song, and Vera Flint, now and forever ashen, added her voice to the chorus, knowing at last she had found her true melody. Finally, let me send my deep thanks to you. Thank you for listening and for allowing this story to speak to your heart. The Wild West still holds countless truths, some painful, some tender, all worth remembering. Stay with us, subscribe, comment, and invite others to discover these untamed stories. From our hearts to yours, thank you for being part of this journey. Aviso legal barra disclaimer. Each story shared here is produced for storytelling enjoyment. Certain scenes may include fictional or dramatized elements inspired by historical circumstances. Although AI tools assist us in visuals, narration, and script development, the emotional tone, editing, and quality control are conducted by people to ensure meaningful experiences. We fully uphold YouTube's policies, using no deceptive recreations or impersonations of real individuals. All creative resources are properly licensed. Unauthorized copying, re-uploading, or remixing is not permitted. Thank you for supporting the effort behind every episode we create.